All right, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday.
Good morning, Grace.
Morning, Corey.
Morning,
Hi,
Ben.
Ben.
Morning.
We'll give it an Eastern Oregon 4 or 5 minutes, to get everybody on.
Right.
I like your thumbnail photo there, Clayton. That's a good one.
Oh,
It's
thanks.
nice and peaceful.
Yeah, it's a real picture too. It's not just some
Is it
computer-generated nonsense.
Did you take that photo?
Yeah, actually,
That's nice.
it's
Oh, cool. It's your
kind
background.
of south of, or sorry, west of Mount Washington, near Bend.
Nice. It's gorgeous. Looks like the background of an inspirational motivational poster.
Right. I'm having a slow and rough start to the week, so it's like, why not go
Aw,
a little
little
something
touches.
uplifting here?
Yeah, a little subliminal messaging. Well, all new names. So, hello, everybody. I think we'll probably get started with at least introductions, and then a few more people might join as we get going. Yeah, we'll just do that. So my name is Corey Quillen. I am the project coordinator for the Rural Engagement and Vitality Center, which is the junction box facilitating these meetings. I do have a Fathom note taker going, just if anybody's curious about that. It keeps my brain from going on fritz, and I can read what happened later. And I'll also be recording this call for later viewing by everybody. They can access it on the website. So let's go ahead and go around the room, so to speak, and introduce everyone, and then we'll wrap it up with Benjamin at the end, and he'll kick us off. So, like I said, I'm Corey, and then we'll go to Grace, and then everyone just pick the next person as we go down.
Sounds good. Thanks, Corey. Hi, everybody. I'm Grace Sullivan. I'm the Executive Director here at the Rural Engagement and Vitality Center. And really excited for our guest today to learn more about just the process that goes into planning. So Rev has been hosting these conversations around workforce housing for roughly 2 years now. I joined about 4 months ago, and long term, we want to be very involved in a lot of planning efforts and really helping a lot of smaller cities around Eastern Oregon have access to the planning resources they need. So
This meeting is being recorded.
so this is all part of that effort. And so that's a little bit about me, and I'll toss it over to Clayton. So we'll kind of get the video participants in first.
Yeah, hey all, Clayton Crowhurst, Northwest Housing Alternatives. I'm a housing developer, and our organization does affordable housing development all across the state. I'm based out of Bend, but work in Central and Eastern Oregon. And let's see, okay, over to Tucker, since I know Tucker.
Hey everybody, I'm Tucker Billman. I'm the manager of government affairs for Oregon Trail Electric Cooperative, but I also do our economic development portfolio, and I travel around our service territory trying to learn about new ways that the co-op can be supporting economic development for our communities. And of course, one of those topics always is housing. And I'm on my phone here, and so it's a little bit harder to see folks participating. If someone else would step up to go next, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Lawrence, a member of the Enterprise City Planning Commission.
All right, and then Leanna Kinley.
Yeah, hi, I'm Leanna Kinley. I'm the city administrator for the city of Stevenson. We're located in the Columbia River Gorge, so just across the river from Oregon, and have, ties through MEGED with Eastern Oregon and other agencies. We have a big issue with affordability, housing, all the things.
Seriously. Let's go on down. Let's see. John went, Tucker went, Tamara.
Good morning. Hi, Tamara Mabott, Morrow County Planning Director. Super fun to have somebody from Washington. That's part of our region, I guess. I never think of that. So I have to bump off at 11:30, but just wanted to listen and get caught up with Ben. I saw him the other day, didn't get to hear all the cool things he's doing. Thank you.
All right, and we actually didn't receive any more people showing up. So I will take this opportunity to introduce Ben. I'm honestly not going to try on your last name. I'm not going to do it. I'll let you do that for yourself. But Benjamin is the city manager for the city of Stanfield and has been doing some really great work out there addressing housing issues. Really kind of turning it around for the future, and I'm excited to listen in on him today, what he has to say.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, as Corey mentioned, Benjamin Burgener, city manager of City of Stanfield. I'll go ahead and try to share my screen real quick. Oh, can you?
Corey might have to give you permission.
Yeah.
There you go. You should be able to do it now.
Okay, awesome.
Welcome, Laura.
All right, everybody see my
Yes, we can.
screen there? If I can actually get to the presentation. How did it go
We're seeing the kind of
the
what
notes?
is it, the notes view? Yeah.
It switched up on me. How about that? Is that working better?
Yep.
Okay,
We're good
awesome.
to go.
So yeah, Stanfield, it's been an amazing last 4 years as I've come on to the city of Stanfield and seen the different opportunities. And really, one of the biggest things I've taken my time in the last 4 years is just development throughout the city of Stanfield. Had a lot of different directions we've went, different conversations, different plans, and it seems to be one thing is the same as everything is always changing. And one of the biggest learnings I've taken from my journey with Stanfield is really trying to define what is a small city. And I've learned that there are so many different definitions. And the reason I bring this up is it seems to be the main conversation that comes when development comes to a smaller city. So the Census Bureau, they identify a small city as anything between 25,000, 50,000. I don't think anybody around here would call that a small city. We call that a big city. But in the U.S., perspective-wise, that is generally considered a small city. In Oregon, the DLCD usually has them as 25,000 over is large. Medium city is 10 to 25,000. Oregon, small city, I guess, would then default to anything under 10,000. And there are other definitions, other places you could look where there seems to be so many different definitions of really what is a small city. And really, is it even the population that makes a small city? And that's the conversation or the question I want to ask you to ask yourself. What does a small city mean to you and your city? Because it really does seem to mean something different to everybody. I used to default just thinking population-wise, and I think that's the initial conversation most people lean towards. But when you really dig in and ask, well, what is it going to happen if you have an extra 1,000 people in your city? How's that going to change? Then the conversation takes a different tone to it, and you can really start to uncover what the fears. I think most people are just afraid of change, and they don't want to lose something they currently have that they feel is really helpful or that they love. So when I first came into Stanfield, my council had, I'll take you through the journey that I kind of went through. The city of Stanfield council said, oh, here's one of our main goals for you is we really need to revitalize our economic development. Not community development as much, but definitely economic development. They wanted our downtown revitalized. They wanted businesses moving in. And if you know Stanfield, we're a population just under 2,500 people. And they, just the first conversation I had to them, I said, well, what about housing? If you really want me to start engaging, going out after all these businesses, what are we going to do about housing? Because just having some economic development background, I know that businesses don't really come just because you want them there. As much as we would love to support that, if they can't support their bottom line, how to do this. So I posed the question to them, what comes first, economic development or community development? And to me, they're interchangeable, go hand in hand, but at different stages, you have to have one over the other. So I started having that conversation with my council to really get them open to the idea of community development. Some of the requests I originally got for the economic development, just to kind of give it perspective, I was getting told we should have a Winco in Stanfield, a Costco, Chili's, hotels, gas stations, Cracker Barrel, Applebee's, Mongolian barbecues, etc. There's just the whole gamut of we should definitely have these in Stanfield. We need these. This will help us identify who we are, and we definitely deserve them. And if you're from Stanfield, it isn't as crazy as it sounds. Really, we are in a pivotal position, a really unique geographical spot where we are close to Hermiston, population over about 20,000. Pendleton's not too far away, half hour. Tri-Cities within 45 minutes, well over 100,000. And right there on the I-84 Highway 385 interchange. And we have about 200 acres actually available for economic development opportunities. And it is the busiest interchange between Portland and Ontario. By traffic count coming on and off that interchange, we actually have the busiest. And right now, for the last decade and a half, pilots kind of been monopolizing that area, and we've gotten through a lot of obstacles to open up that land for more people. So where we just annexed in 100 acres about 5 years ago, so that we could make that a lot more available to make more economic development happen. When you look at the travel and all that, if you put all the numbers together, I reached out to Costco, like, this is perfect. Like, for the future of Costco, this would be the best place. You get people come down from Tri-Cities. You can get more than 100,000 people surrounding to all drive to it. It'll be great for you. And he just looked at our population, everyone just kind of laughed at me, like, yeah, nice try. And so that's why, it really is important to have that conversation. I mean, you want me to revitalize downtown and bring in these big businesses? It's possible. Anything is possible. We just need to position ourselves in the right way, and we need to have the right messaging. So when I asked I turned that conversation over to housing, you get a lot of the typical small town comments. Well, we don't want to become the next Portland. I had one, my very first housing development we're looking at, we're doing some townhomes. We never got these through, but there was the first one that we kind of started processing through, and the housing owner literally came over and said that. It's like, well, I moved away from Portland to get away from developments like this. We're going to be the next Portland. I was like, whoa, I think we're like centuries away from her becoming Portland, and definitely not in my lifetime. That would be quite, I mean, at any trajectory of growth, this could be quite a while to get there. Don't bring Portlanders to our area. If you bring a certain type of housing, that it'll bring different types of people that they don't necessarily want in this area, that don't fit, I guess, the culture that they're looking for. That's fine as long as it's on the other side of town. This will destroy my views. We don't want to lose our small town. Developers, big developers, they don't care about our city. They're just going to put a strain on our system. And the list goes on. What was interesting is our vision statement for Stanfield that the council had put together long before I got here was that we're a welcoming, inclusive community known for its hometown atmosphere, quality housing, business development, friendly government, and continued measured growth. So we really started focusing on what does measured growth mean? We can't really go away from this development. As we had these conversations, we really needed to focus on being able to grow. And a lot of that came from conversations I had with them about other messages that I was hearing from people. Saying, well, no, we do need to grow. People want to live in Stanfield, just like you came here to Stanfield. You had something that drew you here. Other people want to live here, but there are no housing. The housing is too expensive. They'd like to raise their family, but there's no housing for them to stay, so they're losing their family to other cities. It'd be nice if there were more options. We talked to some of the people on here from doing more affordable housing options. That is a huge deal anywhere, but how do you really get the demand or show a developer that there is that demand in a small city? It seems to be default. They think just the bigger cities. When I talked to some of the developers originally that were just, if I went back to the map, you show Hermiston just a couple miles away. Developers have been there for a decade plus, and I talked to him about Stanfield. I said, hey, when are you going to come over our way? We have some land that's coming available. And he says, we're Stanfield. It's like, what do you mean we're Stanfield? We're like next door. You've been here how long? And there seems to be that disconnect if there's not some type of energy or synergy going around development in that town. And a lot of that comes because small cities don't necessarily have the resources to get the messaging out or to get the right planning documents or get the connections that they need to get people interested and actually see what those opportunities are. Most developers I talk to are shocked to find out that our interchange is the busiest interchange. I pull up the numbers and show them. I go anywhere in Portland and the Dalles and these bigger places that have a lot more business, a lot more people. I said, look, you've got more traffic here. We can do a lot more. And it will help feed that bottom line. But also with the housing, I started to show we had to get that first housing in there to catalyze additional growth. But as soon as we got that first one building, people have that fear of missing out, and they start. All of a sudden, I have developers coming in beyond the ones I'm just reaching out, and saying, "Hey, what available property you have? What things can we do to be part of this growth? There's a great opportunity." And Stanfield has this certain feel. I had one developer say that we had. I don't remember the word, but it's like the special feel that Stanfield has compared to everywhere else, and everybody. And the people they're talking to, they're bringing their employees into Hermiston area. And they're like, well, they really want to live in Stanfield. Well, why? What type of culture are you guys building? It seems to be unique. And really being able to get that messaging out, getting that that culture of what is unique to Stanfield has been one of the biggest opportunities to developers, and one of the hardest parts of a small city to do, because I'm just one person. I don't have a bunch of marketing backgrounds. Doing graphics detail with my slides is not the best in the world, but putting together these marketing campaigns and different things is not easy in a small city. So that is definitely a resource that I looked for other people to help with if I can, or I had several tasks I had to really accomplish if I wanted to get a WinCo here or something in the future. But I definitely had to attract new housing to get a catalyst for additional growth. And I personally pivoted off of, or benefited off of, we had a Patriot Heights, which is a Umatilla County Housing Authority that was doing the lower moderate income housing. And it was in a very unique look and feel. It wasn't just apartments. We had it built as a community. There's 40 housing duplex / units There's single family or single rooms, double and triple rooms, as well as a community center there. And as those houses started to go up, it just built a lot of that. Once again, we had that traffic coming through. So people are, what's going on? What's going on? That's one thing I can never say about Stanfield. If there's anything moving dirt, I get so many questions. What's going on? It's very visual because we have that flow going through. And it's not just residents; it's people coming through, and it's developers, etc. So I started to build a lot of connections with landowners. We worked on our downtown, got some grants to read, and worked with ODOT as well to do some additional bulb outs. We got lights. We really just wanted to make these visual areas. We focused on anything that people could see as they drive through. We wanted to really improve that so they could see development happening. We had to change the messaging around growth. Like I said, there's a lot of resistance to housing. What is a small city? Defining that through the updated comprehensive plan development codes. I got a grant with the DLCD to get a big planner to go through updating those, and that was a big thing that we focused on. Well, what does it mean to be a small city? What growth are we afraid of, and why? And how can we really take hold of that? And a lot of the question came through that the development's coming in our area. It's been going in Hermiston and Umatilla for quite a while, and eventually it's going to creep over here. Do we want to let Hermiston control how our surrounding area looks, or do we want to control our own fate? And that's what I really focus on, is let's take control of our destiny. Let's make things happen the way we want to. Let's put in the rules in place that we want as a city so that we can have the growth in the way that we want. We can preserve that small town feel, that small city feel. So being able to put things, to codify them, put them in there saying we want it to look like this, we want it to feel like this. These are things that we can do, and we in the development code and comprehensive plan. So that as developers come in, they already have that sense of identity of what Stanfield wants to look at. In addition to working with me and or other planners, beforehand, you can really get that sense of how to build that development ahead of time, the way that's going to benefit the city, and it helps take away that fear of, well, developers don't care about our city. And it's true. Large developers typically are looking for the bottom line, but they obviously want to make something that is meaningful. They want people to buy it. One example, I had a developer in Hermiston that they were new to the area and they started doing townhomes, and they were looking in our area as well. And they just kind of went with their own contemporary look. And to this day, they haven't really sold much because they just kind of went with their own thing. And as they're starting to look in Stanfield, I had people who were interested in housing, even in this market. This was just even a couple of weeks ago with the rates the way they were, still wanting to buy houses up to $300,000. There are people in that market, and these townhomes would have fit that bill. But as they looked at that developer, he said, well, we don't like the product he's giving. And the landowner we're working with actually had several different developers. It helped him choose what developer he was going to go with, because he wanted to be successful in Stanfield and not have the same issue that was facing in Hermiston. And part of that is we wanted to be creative. We needed to make this look and feel like what Stanfield wants. And so we're working with what the townhomes look like, not just your typical townhome, but to make sure there's some space between the walls. There's still some connection at the garage, but it's not going to be the typical townhome where it's just the shared living wall all the way down. And that's going to be, and is a little more attractive to our residents, and it will help those continue to go forward at the price point that we need. So it's been a huge benefit to work with me as a city manager or a planning official to say, well, what really is that market in Stanfield? What are people looking for? I've talked to realtors, I've talked to different things. I have a lot of that experience. And yes, sometimes my time is limited, but I am personally always willing and wanting to help things happen. I think most planning officials are the same way. Sometimes we're constrained by the rules, but if we can look through those rules and figure out how to make it work, we want to make that happen. Another thing with working with codes that I have uncovered, or as I'm working with developers, a lot of times we think that, well, the code's there, that's all we have. If there really is something that you see that can be changed, or you think it should change and it would fit the market and the community and their values, don't be afraid to speak up. Codes and things can change. And as we went through this update, there were a lot of different things that we changed in our code, because we actually got the input from developers, we got input from the business owners, we got input from our residents saying, well, what do you want? What do you see? And we had a lot of those comments of, well, we want more housing and it's too expensive, and our code currently restricts this one was a shocker to me, as well, I have some of these out here. I'll get to those in. But yeah, some of the things that I got through the Comprehensive Development Code, I was like, I would have never expected Stanfield to accept those ideas. But as I got feedback from the actual residents, the Planning Commission, the City Council, and as we had those conversations, they changed how they defined what a small city was, because that's what they always held on to. We're a small city, we don't want to lose that. How do we control that? So,
just out of curiosity, Ben, what were some of the like code updates that you ultimately ended up making in order to facilitate a lot of this housing growth?
yeah,
I might be getting ahead of myself.
yeah, I do have those at
Okay.
the end. I'll just go to some of my surprises. So, as we talked with the council, I was so surprised from the comments I got at the very beginning, where they didn't want, the small city means, well, I'll go back to that one. Small city, it's the agriculture surrounding the city. Everybody knows everybody. Events and activities you wouldn't expect happen here. People want wider streets. There's community-based businesses, large front yards, large backyards, large lots. People go out of the way to help standard-looking housing. I had one of my planning commission members say, it's like, we need to have huge lots because I want to preserve the land in this area, and I want my kids to be able to grow here, and it's still gonna be small when they're old. And I was like, okay, that, if you look at some of these and a lot more that I got, some of them contradict. You got these people talking and like, well, hold on, I don't see that the same way. And they're like, oh, I don't see that the same way either. And in the end, some of those changes that I was just surprised at how it came through on our final code. And one of my council members, it was the biggest change. He sent out a feedback in Facebook and just got did a survey to get people's feedback of all the development and what they would like to see further of. And he was one of those people that wanted large lots, larger stuff. And in the end, he's like, his comment was, actually, I think we should have higher density where we cover less ground. Because to me, that small city, and what I get from our community, is that they really love the surrounding agriculture. They love the small footprint of the city, not the number of people here. And if we could preserve that footprint as much as possible so that they can go a couple blocks, a mile, and they can go walk out, and they're walking out in fields, and they're out in the middle of nowhere, and it doesn't feel like they're part of a city. He says a city is a city, but what means a small city to him now, after all that, is that footprint of the city, and making sure there's quick access to the outdoors. A lot of build up, not out. So we changed some of our standards that were very helpful, like on our community, our business side. We actually went more strict and said we can't have residents on bottom, we're only second and third floor, so we're having a lot of code issues. But on the residential side, there's like, well, let's be more lenient. Let's allow single wides in residential. That before was like unheard of. Like nobody wanted a single wide. You had to have the double wide or more. You had to have the multi-sectional, I guess is how it was defined in the code. They wanted to make sure they're big enough. And no, they shrunk that through this process because they're like that. They came to the realization as we had these conversations, people were like, we can't afford to live here. We love to live here. I want my kids to live here, but we can't afford a $400,000 home to start off. That's not realistic. So they eased up on some of the housing types to allow higher density or smaller housing. You have the those cluster housings and different things like that, just allowing those smaller units on smaller lots. So we actually maintained our 5,000 square foot minimum lot size, whereas at the beginning of the process, there was the pitchfork saying we need 10,000 square feet or more. That needs to be where we're going. And they ended up, after having these good discussions, to actually being okay with the small, because they wanted to bring down the housing costs. And
yeah. This is Debbie Rady. And did you guys have discussions about tiny homes?
Yeah, we have had discussions about tiny homes. Currently allowed in our RV parks. I think there was an issue in city limits if it's not on a permanent foundation, but anything on a permanent foundation, we already allow, you can do small housing. We don't have a minimum house size, but if it's on if it's mobile, it needs to be in an RV park to to be one. But we do have RV parks in Stanfield. We have 3 of them throughout Stanfield. So those are an available type already in our area. Something that didn't look much beyond that, but that to get away from, to allow something similar, like say those cluster housing ideas, to make the code more lenient, to have those smaller houses on smaller parcels, where you could have a 500 square foot house at 400 square. You know, it's possible on these smaller lots for sure.
I saw your note about wanting our children to come back, or people to come back and live in your community.
Correct.
And that's been in Boardman. That has been a theme as well. It's gotten so expensive in Boardman to rent even a single apartment. For a young person to have to pay $1,200 a month, they're paying Portland prices for an apartment, for example.
Yeah,
So I wonder, what's your discussions about those young people being able to get from living in grandma's basement and having an affordable first place to live?
Yeah, and that is a conversation. That's why they eased up on those single wides, so that we have a very similar situation in Stanfield where rent literally you're looking $1,600 to $2,000 for a 2-bedroom, and it's just ridiculous. And so having these smaller housing types, you can get a mortgage cheaper than you can get a rent right now. And part of that, and a lot of these issues come from just the supply and demand. There is no demand, or there's no supply. There's a huge demand, and so that's driving up costs. Even in this market, it's kept costs up. I keep going to my developers. I use that to my advantage in Stanfield because I look at Hermiston. They have a plethora. They have a ton of housing supply, and it's not moving right now. But Stanfield has still sold every single one on the market because of that demand, where people want to live in that smaller city. We've gotten that message out of what Stanfield has to offer, and people. It's not just that we have the cheaper taxes, et cetera. There's a whole messaging that we've been using, but yeah, we've been working with developers and having those. I've been having those conversations, saying, look, this is what the demand is. This is where people are looking. We need those. So we do have a manufactured home park that a developer, he cut his development in half. He did single family for half of it, and then on the other 20 acres, he's doing a new a nice manufactured home park. But it's all an effort to bring down those costs. The affordable housing, we're trying to track some more of those, just like Patriot Heights, where that rent is still under $1,000. And the unique part of that was when we work with those developers, it wasn't just it's not just the cheapest. We want a mix of all of those. So there's a Section 8 housing. There's the waivers that they can get, or the rent reductions, but also the people up to $50,000, or I think $60,000 now, somewhere in there, can qualify for those houses as well, at a reduced rate compared to anywhere else. And so when we're working with developers, that's the question: is how do we get these costs down? And one of the questions I typically hear, because I know that was one of the questions, well, what do we charge the developers? Yeah, we do have SDCs. It's $5,400 per unit that we charge in Stanfield. And there's been a question throughout the state, well, is that what's going to reduce these housing costs? And I can tell you straight up, if I took away the SDC, their house is still going to cost the resident the same. The developer just takes off with $5,400 more in profit. That really isn't what's driving the cost of the housing. There's a lot more to it with the infrastructure, or just the overall market having lack of supply, that really has raised a lot of those. There's obviously the cost of labor and other things that go into that as well. SDCs are the developments that we have to actually help out the city. That's the last thing I really want to discuss. We do make some deals with them, if they're doing offsite improvements, if they're doing things with that, we want to utilize that because it's cheaper for them to do that. But not just for the sake of getting a developer, because there is a strain obviously on the system. And when we did our SDC study, the actual SDCs we should have been, or our study recommended that we should be charging, was like 12 or 14,000 per unit. And the council, way back when, they decided to go with the smaller amount because they still wanted to attract developers, and the other cities around here were not anywhere close to that number. So 5,400 seems to be pretty close to what the market is in this area. It's not scaring people away. Yeah, it is a number, but it's helped the city make sure that we can make the improvements we need to help support some of these developments. And that's not that just cuts the city off somewhere else if we get rid of those. So yeah, there's a lot of different conversation going on, and really we're looking to be creative about how can we make these in a different way that hasn't been looked at before. And like I mentioned with the townhomes, that was one of those areas is, well, the townhomes don't typically sell in Stanfield or Hermiston or this area. They're not, it's a new product that people aren't familiar with, so they're hesitant. And as I mentioned with Hermiston, they built them at standard where they're just every wall's touching each other, and people are, we don't want to live where we can, their perception is they can hear their neighbor, not understanding. I mean, I grew up where townhomes were, I lived in one for a short time, and, you know, they make them different than just a duplex, but the community isn't ready for that. And so we're looking at different ways to design those that don't meet the definition of townhome for our code, but ease those concerns. So we can still build that less expensive product on a smaller footprint, but get the market that we need.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Are the SDCs separate from like public works or the infrastructure costs? Because Baker, I live in Baker and we don't have SDCs, but we have like from public works, like I'm building a couple little accessory dwellings on my property, and I ended up dividing my property and then relocating, upgrading my existing utilities. And so my initial estimate for utility infrastructure was going to be like 24,000, and I cut it down to like 7,000. And we don't even have SDCs. It's just like these public works fees. And from what my understanding is, they're like usually separate things, but I was just curious if in Stanfield, if that includes the utility infrastructure, those SDCs.
So typically a developer has to put in their own infrastructure, water, sewer, et cetera. So they pay for that.
Okay.
And then the SDC is on top of that. We have it separated for water, sewer, transportation, and parks, and that's for the system as a whole. So that we make additional. And so I mentioned typical ways we have waived those is like we're working with one developer up north, on the north side of town, where we, you know, it's advantageous to have a pathway going from that development down to our Dollar General. It's on that side of the street. It's the only development on that side of the street. I don't want people crossing, so people can actually walk there and take their groceries home or whatever they need from there. It's not required for his development permit because it's way off his site. It's probably a good mile of pathway, or half a mile of pathway, but we are, you know, making a deal with him that, hey, we'll waive your transportation ones to build that because he can build a lot cheaper than we can, and he will end up saving money in the long run because he doesn't have to pay those SDCs. And really comes down to what does that cost that we reimburse him or that we waive. And in some instances, that's at the cost of what it would have been for the city. In other instances, it's just, you know, a little bit over what it would have been. But like I said, it is cheaper, and it's cheaper for them, it's cheaper for us to go that route. And that's when we'll waive those because they're helping the system outside. But no, we typically, it's separate from typical infrastructure. Now, one thing that we are working on to help with those, I have a developer, one of the things that really has restricted a lot of development in Stanfield, two sides of the city, we have 2 lift stations that need to be built, and they're both priced at $1 million a piece. Any developer that comes in, unless they are a mega developer, they're like, $1 million, there's no way I'm touching that. And the city doesn't have, we're a small city, we don't have $1 million sitting around to make just for a lift station. So we worked with the county, and we were able to secure a grant, and we not to build it, but to create a revolving loan fund to where we can build that through the developer at a really cheap interest. They do have to pay it back, but as they sell their property, so it reduces their upfront cost and reduces a lot of the risk because it doesn't have to be paid back until the development is built. And that's a lot of the developers obviously have that risk of, well, is it going to sell? How long is it going to take? So that upfront $1 million is put into that low interest revolving loan. And as they pay that back, it refunds itself and builds up that. So the main reason I actually built that was not for these bigger developers, but because I wanted to secure this grant so I can help local developers that have maybe the 4-acre lot that want to put in 10 houses. And they're like, well, I can't put a street through here. There's no way I can afford that. I can't get a loan for that. I don't do this as my regular business. And we found a lot of issues on these smaller parcels where they'd like to do that. They just don't have the means to. And so I use this bigger development to secure the grant funds so that once it's paid back, we can help these smaller local developers who care and live in the city be able to develop their properties the way that they should be. That benefit everybody who's going to be there. So
Yeah. Do you allow accessory dwelling units?
we do.
Yeah.
Yep, up to 900 square feet, I believe.
Okay.
So they did prohibit. They made that certain square footage, I think originally to prevent, a manufactured home from being in there, but it stick built accessory dwellings typically.
Right. And I'm just curious how many people, like I'm curious how many there are in town and like how many people know about it. Because I'm really interested in that kind of like infill. It's a good way to infill on a property. It's a great way for people who own a piece of property to live there and then have supplemental rental income.
Yep.
So I just like that's on a small scale. Like that's kind of what I kind of think about is like someone who's not a big developer but like has some properties and like filling in, just bringing more awareness. I know in Baker we have housing production strategies and ADUs have been one of the highest priorities of what the city is looking towards so that we're like filling in. I mean, we still have a good amount of land to build on just in general, but creating more housing in that way.
ADUs, it's kind of interesting. Our development code, I always felt was a little bit ahead of its time. It was back original when I got it. I think they did in 2003 or something. And they already had, ADUs in there. They already allowed these smaller lots. They allowed a lot of these things that we made adjustments to that originally we had the pitchforks. They wanted to get rid of those things. But as we went through that, no, they kept a lot of those. ADUs have become a lot more of a topic in the last several years. There are plenty. I don't have a number for you, but I get asked about them, and there have been several built in the last year or two, which for small Stanfield is great. Because of our small lot size, I get a lot more people just dividing it and they take their 10,000 square foot lot, divide it in half, and just put a new unit on there so they can make it a little bit bigger.
What is your minimum lot size? Sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions. But...
Yeah, 5,000 square feet for a regular single family house or 3,000 for a townhome.
Okay, yeah, because ours is like 7,500, and I'm like, wish you were smaller.
yeah. So that the 5,000 seems to be that sweet mark where it's really easy. I mean, usually when I have developers come through, their typical lot size is 7,500 to a little over 10,000, and that 5,000 square foot lot allows those 10,000 square foot lots to be just divided, and they can then either sell it and make more income, or just like you said, rent it. I don't know. It just seems like they tend to prefer to have it divided as opposed to just the ADU if they have the choice. And most people I work with, so. But.
Sorry, I can wait to ask more questions too. What are your utilities there? Like electric and gas? Is it?
Yeah. Boy. So at Stanfield, we offer water through the city. It's water, sewer, and garbage. Typical bill is about 100, 120 with all those combined.
No, I just was meant, who are the companies? Because I work with Energy Trust of Oregon, and I'm just curious because we have like new construction incentive programs for residential. And so I was just curious who.
We have Pacific Power, UEC for electrical. We've got Cascade Gas for gas.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the city does the other utilities.
Yeah, so that's just, I don't know, have you heard of Energy Trust of Oregon at all?
I have I've worked with them for city utilities. I haven't looked at incentives for development, for housing development though.
Yeah, it's more for like it's for single family. It can be for townhomes if they're like side by side but not stacked. But there's money for builders / developers who are building. They have to build better than the current energy code, and they work with a third party verifier. I'm one of the people that helps, but Todd Blackman's up in that area. But anyways, I can put my email in the chat and talk to you more about that, because that could be another way. Like some cities will, I don't know how your permitting process works, but like some cities have really long permitting processes. Sometimes they'll do expedited permits for people who are doing more energy efficient units, or I think it's just important to know that that can help offset some of the development costs if they're, getting all these homes that are in a program.
Oh, you're right. In fact, that is one of the comments I get a lot. Stanfield actually has a pretty expedited process already. We do the land use permit in the city, and then we have state building codes due in Pendleton. They do the actual building permit, but they usually stop the small cities around here, and we're one of the few that are growing, so we kind of get their ear all the time. And it take more than a couple months to get through most of those. Usually about a month, I think, is turnaround. So compared to other cities, that actually is one of the strategies that I had, is to make sure that our process was streamlined. And our developer, who's up there doing a 50-acre developer right now, development, that was the comment he made. Two things. He actually came to Stanfield because a prior architect I worked with recommended Stanfield because of our permit process and just working with the city. And then the one thing I asked, we looked at these different incentives. How can we help, whether it's to help with getting any infrastructure, SEC waivers. That was the one thing he said. He's like, just get a permit done on time. Get it quick and done. That'll save me more money than anything else. Like, time is money to me, and I've heard that you have a good process. Just keep with that, and I'm perfectly happy. I can afford everything else. The rest of them, with these bigger developers, like those rest of those things are just such small, millions of dollars. Who cares? It's such a small thing to him. It's like, well, not to me. But sweet, yeah, we won't put out millions of dollars in incentives. Let's just get your permit done. So, yeah, every developer has their own little ask, but.
All right, cool. Thanks for answering my questions. I put my contact in the chat, and then I put a link to the EPS program. So feel free. I live in Baker, but I do cover most of Eastern Oregon. And then, like I said, Todd does a lot of work in Hermiston. He works with the high school with the student built homes.
Yeah, that's a good program too.
Yeah. So Energy Trust is definitely here to support builders and developers. So thank you.
Yeah.
This is Debbie Rady. I was wondering about veterans, and I know there's projects around the state where they're kind of helping build their own homes, or have you heard about any of those kind of programs where you're getting help in the building part of things?
I'm not from the state side. I have been working with Cedar Architecture. He did some stuff up in LeGrand where they did a cluster home for veterans that we've been trying to explore doing something similar here.
Okay, maybe that's it. And then like the project in Hermiston where young people are building homes. I mean, it seems like there's just not enough contractors for some of the small communities to get them to come here, where there's so much more opportunity for them to make larger amounts of money in bigger cities, or at least that's what I'm hearing. And so what kind of legislation or help would it be in licensing or whatever to have more people in the construction trade to actually get some of this stuff built? Or have you looked at that, or is there any discussion about the labor part of getting construction projects done?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question for our area. One of the blessings, I guess, of the Umatilla Morrow County area is there's a bunch of Amazons, not in Stanfield, but in the northern part of the county and on, like I said, Morrow County as well. So they actually eat up a lot of the contractors any of the contractors we do have are very busy with those bigger projects. At the same time, it has brought other developers and other contractors to the area. I don't know if it's a net zero because it seems like we suffer the same problem. There just seems to be a lack of contractors overall. But those that we do have are doing really well, and they're expanding their businesses and adding to them. Whereas before any of the growth happened, they were just small and weren't doing a lot. So, yeah, I don't have an answer on that one. That's a good question. But that
And
is
then the other suggestion, kind of what I was talking about with the tiny homes, it's something that seems to me would be easy to get built somewhere and brought in a short order. I've even looked into like these pods that are for like mother-in-law pods that you can put on your property to add housing. Could there be a pod that's allowed to be on your property where you have a couple acres, you have an acre or whatever, and you have extra space for your adult children, just a single young woman who wants to have her own space affordably rather than living in the basement.
Yeah, I know I've seen some legislation out there that passed recently in counties where they can allow the RVs, and I would assume a tiny home would fit under that same definition there to allow, as long as there's another unit there.
It's kind of a home that's like a manufactured home. It's built in a factory, but
Yeah.
then assembled on site, right? So it looks nice. It's not like it's on wheels and can be just carried off. But it's a substantial, investment, but it's not 200,000 or 300,000. It's,
Yeah, like I say, I know with the city code, and I'd have to check on there, but as long as it is on a permanent foundation, it qualifies as an ADU. But yeah, having a little pod, these little, not currently in our code for that, but that's an interesting idea. We don't have a lot of lots that would be big enough in our city limits for that. Like say in the county, I could see a lot of use in there. But as or if we expand our UGB, then there'll be some bigger parcels available. It's not a current issue that I see a lot of people ask for in Stanfield, but it could become an option that even some of these developers look at, to where that could be a creative way to go, where you kind of incentivize the development to, you have a big enough parcel to bring in your own ADUs or even build it that way.
I live in Oregon, but I know Boardman pretty well. But in Oregon, you'll see people bringing in old RVs, fifth wheel trailers, whatever. It appears that's become a very common thing for another family basically to be living on your property in one of these structures. And I believe that there's ordinance about, and I haven't read it, that you can't do that, or whatever, but they're still doing it. So it creates a real friction, right? Because people are trying to live affordably. They're trying to take care of their family, and they're saying, okay, well, we can afford to put the RV on the side of the house and, have people live in there. So I think just my thought is that you create a program for people to put another home or a dwelling of some sort that is acceptable and affordable. You can avoid some of what may distract from your community's aesthetics. I'll put it that way.
Correct, and that's one of the main reasons we're trying to keep with the smaller ADUs. Or we also run that developer for those manufactured home parks where it's more affordable housing. They're going to have single wides over there. They're going to have nicer stuff. And we're trying to incentivize what we want as opposed to just what people make work. And I mean, it's an issue. There's couch surfers. There's people who want to live somewhere that's just so unaffordable, or they don't have the job or whatever. And I had a counselor just ask that last week. It's like, is there anything that we're going to do with RVs on lots? And I know within city limits there's still legislation against living in those. And that's why I mentioned that when I'm in the county, they've eased that up. But I do see that potentially that might also become something they try to put cities into. Until then, though, I agree with you. I think we can incentivize the ADUs or those other options that are pretty much the same idea but nicer, and not falling apart. That would get us where we want to go. Any other questions?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, by the way. That was really, really informative. So our organization, we've got a big presence in Hermiston in terms of affordable income restricted apartments. And I guess my kind of a two-part question here. One is kind of max, unit count that you're seeing as feasible in Stanfield. I think because of rising construction costs and then having, going into competitive funding offerings at the state level, we're, really needing to hit as many units as possible with kind of our developments that we're putting out for funding. That's, right now looking at like in the 70 to 80 unit range, which probably isn't feasible here. But yeah, so curious kind of to just get your informal assessment of like, what's the max, apartment, and multifamily dwelling development size that you think the city could stomach, and then two, kind of what the smallest lot size we could feasibly look at locating that on. I think one of the biggest, kind of lost costs in our development is having to buy additional land to get to that needed zoning density. And so the more we can minimize that, the more we can put into, creating a better building.
It's a good question. That, and it's definitely something Stanfield I've been focusing on with a lot of developers. We don't have apartments. It boggles my mind. We have 2 in Stanfield, and I was like, how do we not have more with all this housing supply shortage, and there's the demand for it? They're all full. How do we not have more? And to my knowledge, I can look it up offline for you if you're interested in the area, but we don't have the density standard for our multifamily is pretty good, and we don't have a huge lot. I can look up some of this real quick. Let's see. Multifamily minimum lot is 10,000 square feet. Yep. So there's the minimum, and I don't think that changed with our updates. As far as density, multifamily, 30 units per acre.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that affordable, thanks to some recent legislation, gets a boost about that in terms of income restricted. So, yeah, and so I guess, yeah, that's good to know in terms of an upper limit. What is, obviously going from having, two apartment, I guess you're saying 2 apartment buildings to
complexes, maybe
yeah.
like 12, 24 units in them.
Okay. Gotcha. So yeah, I guess, would something in the range of, 40 or 50 units be, potentially feasible? Do you think that would, end up with pitchforks and torches outside your office, or?
No, actually, we had a developer come in. Like I say, that where we were compared to where we are is completely different now. And our last developer that came in, he's not quite ready to go for it, or he's looking for different developers who are willing to go through there. He's got the land, he's got 40 acres. He was looking at a mix use of townhomes, duplexes, and apartments. He was proposing 1,200 units to go in there, is how he had kind of designed it. And that number wasn't what the pitchforks came out on. What actually people complained about was he gave a preliminary design of what they would look like. They look more like what you would see as a contemporary or Portland look, kind of the newer scale. Like, that's not what we want. And I was like, well, we're not approving anything right now. He's just proposing that he wants this. This is an idea. He can change anything, but no, they understand. In fact, the taste, or the taste, I guess is not right. The desire for apartments is there right now. There's such a lack of that. There's not a single one I've heard contrary to getting a big apartment complex in the area. So there's definitely the desire and demand for it, and I don't have the pitchfork. So no, when you're saying 30, I'm like, no, you could do several hundred, and you wouldn't have people like with pitchforks. So
okay, that's really good to know. I think the thing, and you had mentioned this at the start of your presentation, is just backing up the demand, and I think would be anytime at least our organization throws a project in front of OHCS in Eastern Oregon, they're consistently questioning the ability to lease those units up and the demand for it, even though, we have projects in Hermiston that stay completely full with multi-year waiting lists, and I'm sure it would be the same there in Stanfield.
That's how Patriot Heights is with 40 units. It filled up before it was even done, and
okay.
They've got months-long, years-long wait lists. Like, it's just such a demand, they can't fill it. And yeah, no, there's, like I said, that was one of those biggest ahas that was kind of shocking to me when we started the project. People were like, we want big lots. To one of my counselors, and in general, they had the idea of, well, let's build up, not out. Let's actually have the higher density. They want that now. Like, they're like, let's preserve the surrounding land, let's build what we have, and let's make it high density. Because they all acknowledge there's a demand right now, and the way they're looking at it is, how do we get through the demand without sprawl? And that is going to, in their mind, preserve that small town feel, along with our programs, along with the look and feel of different things. But that was one of those areas that, yeah, the density became the opposite of what I expected compared to what they talked about, which is great. I think it'll help with the affordability quite a bit.
Yeah, and that's great to hear from our perspective, because it's much more cost effective to build, up 2 and 3 stories, as opposed to having to do multiple, single 2-story townhome buildings that are spread across the site. And I would say,
one developer, his 3-story ones he was looking at, I guess he has a berm that goes halfway up one side of the building, so it's like a 2.5, but it's really 3 stories, so we didn't have to do some of those things that a 3-story requires. We still get the full 3-story. And we're like, oh, hey, let's be creative. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and I will say, just for SDC comparisons, I'm costing out a project right now, Sisters, that is, and they're very similar size population wise to Stanfield. Their SDCs for this project are in the neighborhood of about 15,000 a unit. So you're a little lower than.
And apartments actually are a little less than 5,400. They think they're coming at 80% of that or something. I have to look at the.
Okay, great to know.
They're less than 5,400. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Oh, I'm sorry, Ben. What were you gonna?
Oh, I was just gonna. Yeah, Hermiston Umatilla, they actually updated their SDCs recently, and I was like, thanks, guys. You made it easier for me. We become that much more appealing. So, but yeah, I'd love to talk to you, Clayton, about any of those opportunities. I have developers who would have land for you too. So.
Yeah, we'll reach out.
Yeah.
See you later, Debbie. Thanks for joining. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for this engaging, enriching conversation. I feel like a lot of connections have been made, and like people are all sharing emails now and getting on each other's radars. This is fantastic. Exactly what we're trying to do here. Ben, thank you so much for this conversation today. This has been so good. So good. I'm very happy that you were willing to come here today and talk to everybody. This recording will be on our website as well. So if anybody needs to reference it again, and those recordings like show the chats and stuff. So if there's a website that you weren't able to grab, that'll be available. Grace, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, just the last thing, Ben, if you're okay sharing your email address so that we can all, that anyone else who is part of this can reach out to you directly, or if anyone is watching the recording and wants to reach out, where can they find you? That would be fabulous, because this is such a pertinent need all across Eastern Oregon. So it's really encouraging to, see how you've been able to kind of reframe just the needs and the goals that so many of these cities have, that kind of put the pitchforks away, because that's something that I think all of us have experience with in some way or another, directly or indirectly. So just that reframing and kind of pattern interruption is so important. That kind of helps realign everyone towards a common goal. And so that's just really appreciative. All right, so check in the chat, everyone. That's Ben's contact information. Again, thank you so much. This was a really, really wonderful time. And
just one last comment, Grace, that you mentioned. One of the biggest advice or recommendations I have for everybody is just to make sure you work with the good variety of stakeholders that you have in your community. When we put together some of these committees, we had, people from the Latin community, we had the business owners, we had our developers. We made sure that we're reaching out to everybody with different, demographics to find out what their opinion was of this, so that it's not just us putting out policy. We're actually trying to listen and scope this to what people want. And that alone got them talking and defending each other, made them change their own perspectives that I didn't have to, because they're hearing it from someone who's not a city person. They're like, oh, this person who lives here actually thinks we should have it this way because here are the reasons they have. And it really did make a difference in changing people's perspectives.
Yeah, getting those champions and first followers critical to helping those efforts, and again, takes a lot of work off your plate. But I think it all comes back to kind of that marketing initiative that you were talking about in the beginning, right? Like, how do you market yourself to developers, but then how do you also market this to your own citizens?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone for coming in today. I really appreciate it.
Have a great Monday and rest of your week.
Appreciate y'all.